Okay, I think it
Hello.
started.
Yep. Hello. My name is Ethical Pirate.
And
I'm a YouTuber. So yeah.
oh, hi, I'm the Heretic, and today I'm going to be with Ethical Pirates, and we're going to be talking about. Uh, when we first decided to do the debate, it was originally going to be about hierarchy, but it's kind of expanded in scope, hasn't it?
Yeah. Like mutualism versus market anarchism or Austria libertarianism, whatever you want to define it as.
All right. So, anyways, I think we should at least start with hierarchy. Now, in all
Hmm.
fairness, I don't think there's going to be very much disagreement here. I'm almost certain it's going to come down to semantics.
Yeah.
So, just to avoid one of the key semantic issues, I think we should at least get our definitions clear right away. So, when I refer to hierarchy, I refer to a situation in which, or rather, a relationship in which one person has authority over another. And of course, authority referring to one person wants something from the other person and they have to go through the guy who has the authority to get it.
Hmm. Same definition.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm assuming that you agree with these definitions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my definition of cooperative is basically a group of individuals sharing a common interest to work for in that work station or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you agree with that definition.
Sure. I don't have any issues with it. All right. Well, that took a lot less time than I thought it would.
Unlike the geo-libertarian.
Oh God, please don't remind me. Yeah, let's just spend 30 minutes arguing about what the definition of government is. Which is partially my fault. But anyways, well, actually, it's mostly my fault. But anyways, so my thing on hierarchies is that while there is no question, I don't think it's controversial, at least not between us, that the relationship between the subject and the state is a hierarchy.
Hmm.
So, with this in mind, I want to distinguish between these kind of unjust hierarchies and what I would otherwise call just hierarchies. The term you might be more familiar with is natural hierarchies. So, for
Yep.
example, between a doctor and a patient.
Yep. Or a police officer and a civilian, or I should say a private officer.
Police officer would be a terrible example of a natural hierarchy. Like,
Well, yeah.
I think the only way you could go worse is slave versus master.
Hmm.
But anyways, so with this in mind, yeah, I just want to emphasize the distinction between the unjust hierarchies of a slave and their master versus a doctor and a patient, the kind of relationship in which all participants voluntarily consent.
Hmm.
Because, well, again, both parties perceive a mutual benefit. The doctor prefers the patient's resources that they're using to trade for the doctor's expertise, and the patient values the doctor's expertise more than the resources they use to trade for their services.
Hmm.
So, with this in mind, I don't entirely understand the mutualist hostility to hierarchies in general, and I think that in so doing, they create a very generalized hostility that is otherwise unfounded and in addition contradicted by their understanding of the existence of natural hierarchies.
Well, no, you see, the problem we have with hierarchies is basically it. It's not like shared equally. And most of the time, the workers or employees, as you like to call them, do not like working for bosses, regardless if it's like a small mom and pop store or not. They do not like working in those types of work environments. because the boss usually takes the majority of the earnings, and the employees are the ones doing most of the work. Yeah, yes, the boss is keeping up the business and whatnot, but like still, if you have no employees, then you're going to lose business, and then eventually you're going to go out of business.
Of course. And I think we can both agree the extent to which there is such a big emphasis on the traditional hierarchical firm is because, well, the government does everything they can to make sure that the businesses that are the most successful use that business model. Now, whether or not it's going to be the most effective or efficient model of economic firm organization, I don't know. It might
Mm-hmm.
be, I'm not sure, but of course, the best way we can figure this out is through a free market. That being said, ultimately, like this is going to be a decision that every individual employee is going to make themselves. I think that there is a lot of good work that was done by several Austrian economists that point out that people engage or people become employees because they have a shorter or rather higher time preference in that
Mm-hmm.
they perceive then that it's a lot easier to be an employee than to be an entrepreneur. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. These are just decisions that people can make individually. And I don't know if even you can make the distinction that a lot of people like or dislike being an employee. I mean, you can say that it might be more appealing to be a entrepreneur, but I think it's just a question of the grass is greener on the other side effect.
Well, it's not that I want everybody to be an entrepreneur. Say if you have like a cooperative and you're searching for new members, you can easily like find a new member who just like wants to get make an earning.
Sure, and you can and same thing would apply to a business. And I'm not saying that you want everyone to be an entrepreneur. I'm just using that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I just there's nothing. I don't think that there's anything particularly unjust about the employer-employee relationship insofar as the government is not involved in making sure that that is the norm or otherwise more common than it otherwise would be in a freed market.
Yeah, like basically, yeah, like you said, the government forces the boss employee scenario, and basically, most of the time, like the government screws you over if you try to make a cooperative.
Hmm.
Now, there are successful cooperatives that I've seen, like Linux. I'm trying to think of a more off the top of my head. I have like a list, but
I can think
I'll,
of
I'll
I know one, King Arthur Flour. They make excellent banking mixes.
mhm. uh, well, I don't think there's really much disagreement here besides the fact that we don't know what's going to be the end result of a market anarchism.
Hmm. Well, mostly my contention is just this blanket dislike of hierarchies, and I think it would serve at least you better to make a distinction between unjust hierarchies versus voluntary arrangements and
Mm-hmm.
people voluntarily consenting to be in a hierarchy, which, I mean, is entirely possible. Now, of course, you can make the argument that because both parties perceive a benefit from the other greater than the cost of their part of the arrangement, that it's not really a hierarchy because they're both equal, but I could also make the argument that there is a kind of expertise bottleneck that one side is benefiting from, and the other side has the position of being able to gatekeep. So, like the doctor and the patient example, there is going to be as many patients in a medical system as in theory there are people, whereas there is only so many doctors. Figure there's only like one doctor per 10 patients. It creates a certain bottleneck and it gives the doctors a certain amount of economic power relative to the patients, wouldn't it?
Uh, yeah, I'm not fully denying like hierarchies in a cooperative. If like one worker is working harder than the rest, then he's gonna get a lot more earnings than the rest of the workers who aren't working as hard as him.
Yeah, and I've seen studies done where they get four random people in a group, and they always fall into one of four roles. Like this is just them working it out among themselves. I don't remember what all of them are off the top of my head, but there's like one guy who's like keeping track of everything, one guy who is just the leader, and I don't remember what the other two are. And then
Mm-hmm.
they got four leaders from one group, put them into a group, and they fell into those roles as well.
Yeah. Well, a cooperative can have a leader. It's just I know we're gonna get into some semantics here, but democratically elected leader of the cooperative. I'm not saying democracy works on a high scale, but I'm saying voting works on like a lower scale.
Well, what you're describing is that people are just going to organically and voluntarily fall into these roles because, well, they choose to.
Yeah, I don't know what will be the end result of a cooperative, or if there is even going to be a cooperative. But it's either they're gonna like democratically elect a leader, or everybody's gonna have a mutual say.
Hmm.
Which it might be both, to be honest. I would need to look into if there's actual studies of this.
I'm sure there are. I just don't have that information off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm pretty sure Esso could make some arguments as to why why a cooperative would have trouble scaling upwards. But that's a question of efficiency rather than principle. Ultimately, like here's the fun part about cooperatives though. They don't have to scale upwards. At least they don't have to scale up very much. Large large numbers of small cooperatives can easily serve the interests of people as much as a small number of large cooperatives. Hell, arguably they could do better
Mm-hmm.
because, well, larger amounts of competition, driving prices down, increasing innovation, and creating more wealth for larger projects, more capital.
Yeah. Uh, well, I think we covered this. There's not really that much to discuss because we don't know, and I guess we kind of came to a mutual agreement.
I didn't think
Nope.
there would be. I mean, we were talking about this before in several voice chats before this started, and I think we at least. Well, we didn't really go into it at the time. I think we kind of came to an understanding about it before. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we probably spent like. Let me see. How far are we into this? We're 13
20
minutes in.
minutes.
We're
Oh,
13 minutes in, and yeah, we this has already been resolved. So
well, I guess I can get started on. I guess we can see if you agree with me on property. So, what makes property is if you're maintaining it, and I don't mean like fully watching over it like 100% of the time. If you're actually like built like a house around it and you have like your supplies, you're still maintaining it regardless if you leave. But if you like abandon it, then it's no longer yours.
well, how do you know when a property's been abandoned?
There is going to show signs. People might not know it at like the time, but like if the house like starts falling apart and it looks, if it actually looks abandoned, then that's how people will know.
Well, unfortunately, then you're making significant decisions that that can cost people thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars based on aesthetics, which can happen for a number of reasons. I mean, it could very well end up happening that someone's away for like 2 days, and I don't know, due to a termite infestation, the house might look abandoned. A termite infestation that he had no prior knowledge of.
I mean, uh, I guess like if the house looks abandoned, but like if you go inside and if somebody's in there, or if there's like working supplies, then that's how you know you broke into somebody's house.
I mean, you know that facilities can have electricity running into them for like a long time after they've been abandoned, right?
Well, isn't that from because of the state?
Well, yeah, well, the state does have a stranglehold on utilities, but suffice
Yeah.
to say, it's like how do you know like what standard of measurement are you going to use to ensure that it's abandoned? Because quite frankly, a lot of the standards that you're using sound fairly arbitrary to me.
Uh, basically, I'm not saying this is going to be perfect, but like in my mind, this is going to be the best way to determine something. And no way I'm not proposing something like perfect, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, it should at least be. I'm not asking for perfection, but it should be, consistent.
Which, in my opinion, it's going to be most of the time consistent, and there's going to be a few hiccups here and there.
Well, I'd like to know what the problems and inconsistencies are. There shouldn't be any.
Hold on, you cut out there.
I just asked what the inconsistencies are because, well, there shouldn't be any.
Well, basically, the inconsistencies is what you were proposing. Well, not proposing, but yeah, you were basically explaining the inconsistencies. Like, what if the house looks abandoned, but there's somebody actually maintaining it?
Yeah, and of course, and different people can look at the same house at the same time and just say, like, yeah, that looks abandoned. Yeah, that does not look abandoned.
Yeah, basically, most of the time, if a house looks abandoned, it's either crackheads are living there, and crackheads are because of the state, or nobody's living there. Which is and even the natural law has a few. It can have a few not conceptions, but can have a few hiccups here and there. Basically, there. Hold on, let me try to think of. I think you already get the point.
Hmm. However, I'm trying to compare and contrast this with the natural law theory of property, which is a lot more consistent. Property rights are derived from self ownership, and this is because, well, you put your labor into producing certain goods and services that you can use to exchange or even create your own property. Say, for example, you have a piece of unowned land and you decide to build a fence around it. Well, that's not your fan. No, that's not your property. That's basically how enclosure and how homesteading works.
Well, you can build a fence around anything, and actually, there's a problem with that. Say if you built like a fence around, not like already used land, but like a whole bunch of land, and then they're not going to do anything with it. And say if like a whole bunch of I don't know, mafia gangs or people who actually want land for themselves are going to build like a fence around a whole bunch of land, and they're not going to tell anybody about it.
Well, obviously someone's going to know about it because the fence is there. It's physical proof in demonstrating that the land is theirs. Also, if you have someone who has land and is not using it, then clearly it's not terribly valuable to them, in which case they can just sell it for someone else. Clearly they'll value the resources that are being given them rather than continuing to hold on to land that is otherwise just sitting there growing weeds.
Uh, yeah, but thing is, like, again, like they could still there's still power and profit to be made from land. If somebody builds a fence around something, then it's now theirs, as you proclaim. But basically, I still see problems with that because, again, there's still power to be gained from how much land you have.
I'm not sure. You would have to explain how one would gain power from unused land.
If there's, say, if we're living on like a tiny island, and like three businessmen decide to take up the like four corners of the majority of the land. And then now there's like barely any land for the rest of the people. And the land hasn't been used yet, but the village or something were planning on using it for their resources. But now they can't use any resources.
What are the business people doing with it?
Basically, they're saying you could either go without resources like food and stuff like that, or you can pay us, which is I don't think that's fair.
Isn't that just how trade works?
uh, no, you're basically kind of forcing somebody to buy your product. They can't simply just move away. Say if like they're uh, 500 miles offshore and they don't have any way to leave.
It's not a question of whether or not they can leave. I mean, clearly the businessman isn't able to get much in the silent scenario. Is not able to get much out of trying to maintain their monopoly because, well, asking for a completely ridiculous, unrealistic price. So with this in mind, it's in their direct incentive to offer whatever resources they have at a place in which, or at a price in which not only people are willing to pay for it, but people actually want. I mean, you can have a businessman who is trying to sell, or on this island, who is trying to sell, I don't know, bicycles. Now,
And
now with bicycles, of course, like on a small sandy beach island, they're not going to be that useful, are they?
uh, nah, they aren't. But like there isn't going to be any bicycles. But say if
Just,
like the
just, just,
business,
hypoth- just hypothetically, suppose that there was like a crashed cargo ship with just like a crap ton of bicycles,
mm-hmm.
and
uh,
I'm just thinking like this is what he's trying to sell to the islanders. They're just going to look at him like he's got two heads because he's doing something really dumb.
uh, I mean, you could make a profit off of that if you like make a bike trail that are fit for bikes on the beach.
I mean, in that case, he's providing value to the rest of the island, isn't he? By creating roads, by creating pathways, by certainly carving through any jungles or any inhospitable terrain that would otherwise prohibit traffic, foot traffic at least. And also, it adds value to the bikes that he's creating, so it's an investment towards him as well. Well, now that bikes are now useful, he can now actually sell them. So in a way, like you've created a scenario in which the bikes, the businessman with the bikes and the crap ton of land has actually benefited society.
Yeah, but say if the price is stuck at one point and the people that aren't making enough can't get the bike, and there's no competition to lower the price.
Well, he's still not going to sell them at such a ridiculously high price because he's not getting anything out of it.
Well, sure he is. I mean, he's selling it to the rich people,
What rich
which
people? He is the rich people.
you could still rich people can still pander to rich people. That's how most company like Gucci, for instance.
I've heard the term before, but I'm not familiar with them. Probably because I'm
eh,
not fashionable at all.
Yeah, they make a whole bunch of stuff pandering to rich people, but like your average American citizen obviously can't pay for stuff like that.
Of
Uh,
course. Which is why the majority of brands, like what is it like Gucci sells clothes?
yeah, Gucci sells like a whole bunch of stuff like clothes. I think paragliders, like anything you can think of that you could wear or use to adventure with.
Sure. But I think you can understand very quickly that Gucci is not the majority of producers of those goods, even in today's pseudo market economy.
Uh, yeah, but they still make a crap ton of money from pandering to the rich people.
Hmm. But that doesn't mean that that's the only market available, and especially since this one person is the sole occupant of the category of rich, it makes no sense to sell his own goods to himself.
Yeah, I guess, but like
He already has the
not.
bikes. Why would he sell them to himself?
Well, because he already has a ton of bikes, but basically he's getting profit for from those that don't have bikes. He can easily just take like
What profit though? He's not selling anything.
isn't he like selling bikes?
He's trying to, but he's selling them at such a ridiculous price that no one can actually buy them except himself. And he can't
But
make a profit off of himself.
well, since like the people are so rich, they can just say, "Hey, we're gonna just build a road here for ourselves." And but the poor people can't use the bikes.
Sure, but that still doesn't mean that the he's getting a profit off of them. He has to just by supply how supply and demand works. He has to sell. He has to sell them, and that's the only way that he can get money. I mean, it's arguable that he's not going to be very rich for very long, because well, he's not getting resources. And in fact, you could argue that it's costing him resources to have these bikes, because as you know, bikes need to be housed, they need to be stored, they need to be put somewhere. The facilities have to be maintained. The bikes have to be maintained. Figure it's like on a beach with very salty air, and the salt can corrode anything like the chains or the gears on a bike, and they need to be maintained. So it's actually costing him resources to keep it. And given that he's not selling, well, I have to wonder how it is that he got into the category of rich in the first place. Aside from like the fluke of luck that was that he crashed land, he crashed where there also happened to be a crashed cargo ship.
Mm-hmm.
So
How far are we in this?
we are 27 minutes.
Should we continue or move on to a different topic to save more time to get through everything?
I'm fine with continuing on this, but I mean,
Okay.
I think we're getting a pretty clear understanding that the maintenance theory of property, at least in my opinion, doesn't have a whole lot of explanatory power in terms of being able to understand property rights, where it comes from, and how it's maintained. And it's more of an attempt to provide an explanation as to how it is that people can become rich in the first place, and how to avoid this, even though there's nothing necessarily wrong, at least in a free market, of people being rich because they provide a good or service that people voluntarily wish for.
Uh, yeah, no, like still, you could like the only way to become rich in a mutualist society is to be part of the cooperative. And no, I'm not one of those mutualists that believes in like, oh, we should force people to live a certain way. If society actually chooses, or should I say, like naturally develops into like a normal market-based society, so then so be it. That's the winning ideology. Then yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
There is one
But like,
question. There is one question I have,
mm-hmm.
and that is that we both understand that property rights exists for the sole purpose of resolving conflict in regards to who has what resources.
Yes.
So how does this maintenance theory of property resolve the dispute between person A, who is living in a house that they thought was abandoned, and person B, who came back from, I don't know, a business trip or something that had him out of the country for a couple months, and he comes back to see like some guy squatting in his house.
Uh, then I would say person B is in the wrong for that because he left no remark. He didn't even have a sign saying, hey, this property is owned by this time, and I'll be back at this time. Like, I think people will find ways to, like, keep their property, to let people know that, like, that they're using it, regardless of, like, if the house looks abandoned, which that's a pretty good sign that someone's not living there. But, like, I'm pretty sure, like, people will think of something to know that it's still there, that house.
I think you're creating a positive obligation on the part of person B in the sense that it's like a pickpocket who argues that, well, if he didn't want his wallet taken out of his pocket, he should have attached a chain to his pants.
I mean, like, he has all incentive to chase that person out of there, because he was still maintaining it. But, like, I think he should have took better precautions into letting people know that it's his house.
But he's not obligated to. At the very
What do you
least,
mean?
I can't find any ethical rule that suggests that when when you're a passive party, you have an active obligation to ensure, like, yes, I am doing nothing wrong. Don't do these. Don't. They're telling people not to do certain things.
You can actually point. I think you can actually, like, point to saying, "See, this is my stuff right here, and it's not that old." So, like, you can actually point to evidence saying it's your house.
Well, what you can do is demonstrate that yes, it's your property. Here is the proof for me trading for it, so I can demonstrate that this is mine and this person is in the wrong. It doesn't put an active obligation on the property owner, or at least natural rights doesn't put a positive obligation on the property owner to prove that what that their property is theirs.
It- yeah, no, but, like, it's still theirs because they're still maintaining it, right?
Well, that's the
It.
problem. How does the squatter know? The squatter, I'm
I
assuming
don't
that
think
they're a
this.
reasonable person.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's alright.
Discord is being a cunt, but, like, no, like, I don't think it's the squatter's fault either, because it's a misunderstanding. Now he is in the wrong, but I'm pretty sure, like, most of the time people don't want conflict, and then they try to resolve the issue.
Hmm. But in this case, like, we're operating under the assumption that, like, yeah, there is a conflict and they're not able to resolve it among themselves for one reason or another. So how does this conflict get resolved when you have two people who have at least ethically an equal claim, or ethically under the framework of maintenance theory of property, have an equal claim to the property?
Well, they don't, because the guy that was there before was maintaining it, and he didn't abandon it.
The
And
guy who was the squatter was also maintaining it. In fact, he
but
was maintaining it after the
you
guy
you
had
can't
left.
maintain, like, something that's already being maintained.
Sure, you can.
No, no,
Many.
that's not. I don't think you're getting what I'm saying. Like, if someone is already, if someone, like, bought, like, a Coke, you can't go in the room and saying, "Well, I'm maintaining the Coke," and take it away from, like, I don't know, my hands. I mean, sure, you're maintaining it, but, like, I was already maintaining it first, so therefore it's mine.
So isn't this just like the kindergarten rule of property rights, but with an extra step?
I guess.
It's mine. No, it's mine.
uh, n- no, like, it's like, if I buy a product, you can't take it out of my hands because I'm maintaining it, and if I set it down, I'm still maintaining it because for one, I bought it, and for two, I'm gonna use it.
Hmm. And I just realized what I said, and I do apologize if it sounded like I was being condescending.
Nah, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear on how or what the metric is for determining whose is whose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely
Uh,
clear on how one would know if one is maintaining the property or not.
just put a sign stating your name or stating the time you either bought the property, which I'm not opposed to buying property, or you know, have evidence that it's yours, and say like have a date on there. Like, and every time, I don't know, every year happens, you can just update the year.
All right, let's try this then. Another scenario that I think is very realistic. So, same house, same guy. Let's say he won his dispute, and he now knows better. Like, hey, okay, to prevent this from happening again, I'm just going to put a sign up. And then he goes on another business trip, flies on a plane, and the plane crashes. He freaking dies. So any reasonable person, and he has no next of kin, none of that, no will or anything. So now the property is, I think we can both agree, is now abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And but the problem is that the sign is up. So how will people know if the sign is abandoned or if the property is abandoned or not?
Well, simply, again, if like, if like he paid for like a service or something that he's paying monthly for or something, which most U.S. citizens pay for monthly subscriptions. If basically, yeah, if like he hasn't updated his subscription for like a while, then it's pretty obvious that he's no longer using the property. Or if he's like paying for mail and the mailbox is full. But again, I don't think like scenarios would happen like this on like large scale.
I don't know how common it would be, but I like to assume that these scenarios are not unrealistic.
Yeah, they're not unrealistic, and you, you have like all regards to take them into consideration. But I don't think it's gonna be like a I don't know what's the word, epidemic. I
It's
think
not gonna,
that's a
it's not going to be common,
yeah, common.
but I like to think that it's a fairly realistic scenario in terms of like how like what explanatory power does this provide for people, and I'm honestly still not convinced that this isn't pretty arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
You have the standard of, is the mailbox full? No. Is it full enough? No. Is the person paying their bills? Well, honestly, they could still be paying their bills posthumously because the money could be taken out of their bank account, which probably has like, I don't know, $50,000 in savings. Probably can reliably pay his bills for years after his death.
Mm-hmm.
So for all,
And if the guy had family members, I'm pretty sure like that if he has I'm pretty sure he's gonna have a funeral also. So if the guy's name is on the house and but his name is like in the grave, and and you know it's the same exact guy, then there's a clear sign that it's abandoned.
well, again, it just requires a whole
And
bunch of information. I think there's an information problem in regards to
uh, I think yeah, no, I think it does require information, but the information develops naturally.
excuse me.
That's fine.
Uh, I'm not sure what you mean by the information develops naturally.
I mean, like over time, people will take things in, like saying, "Look at the," I don't know, like look at the property and look at his grave and whatnot, and people will say, "Hey, this place is abandoned."
I don't think people, since people are going to be alive for pretty much the entirety of their lives, I can't imagine how common it would be for people to be constantly double checking to see if the owners of certain property, not just houses, of course, but cars and other forms of property, whether or not they're alive. And even then, like even if they do die, even if they do shoot themselves in the back of the head in a tragic weightlifting accident, uh, they're still, of course, next of kin because, as you said, like the chances of this person having no friends or family are very low. So there's a very good chance that it's simply just that the next claimant to the property is, next of kin, family members. So even
Mm-hmm.
then, it's like it's going to dissuade people from being a kind of being a kind of posthumous homesteaders, I guess you could call them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure uh, the guy isn't like totally akin to like getting visitors, or pretty sure the guy has friends also,
Hmm.
and one of his friends might take the property, or friends or family members, for instance. Which now the property is being maintained again,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty sure the family member will have the sign up because of the last incident. And it's unlikely for the next family member to die unless the house is somehow cursed or whatever.
Yeah, it's unlikely. But that said, it's like contrast that with natural rights, which is it just assumes that the person is able to continue holding the property until after his death.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, like we don't really have to deal with problems of who is maintaining the property and who isn't because there's already a claim to it. We don't need to go through the extra step of determining whether or not there is maintenance, and that's another thing. Like, what is maintenance? How do you know what someone is maintaining how someone is maintaining the property or not? And
But
how do you
simply
and
if you're using it.
using it can employ a very large variety of things, which can include but are not limited to destruction of it. I mean, there are parties where people buy expensive china and plates and stuff just to break them.
Mm-hmm.
And, food exists solely to be consumed.
Uh, what is the problem with destroying your own property?
Oh,
I see
nothing.
the problem.
Nothing.
Uh,
I'm just talking about, like, how maintenance can include destruction, and what this can include is if you own a house, you can burn it down. Now,
mhm.
why you would want to do that, I don't know, but it does suggest that an arsonist, someone whose criminal intent or someone who has criminal intent to destroy people's property, could be qual could qualify as maintaining the house.
Yeah, no, like if it's already being owned by someone, it's you're actually like violating their rights because they're the ones that's like maintaining the house and like sleeping in it and doing what you do to maintain it. If you're already using it, someone else can't simply like take it unless you make an agreement, either saying we're both going to share this house or if you're going to give it away to someone.
All right, I see. So there is exclusivity in terms of ownership. You
Yes.
owning something prevents someone else from being able to own it. I think probably should have brought that up earlier, but we're at it
I'm
now.
sorry.
So no, 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 it's my fault.
Should we move on to a different topic? I'm assuming we're 40 minutes in.
I kind of want to go into this a little bit more. We're 43 minutes in, just because it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here. So you owning property prevents someone else you don't want to from being able to own it. Like, I think that's reasonable. But again, we have the problem of how do you know if someone is using it or not?
Uh, like I said, like if you put a sign up or if it looks intact or if there's like a car parked outside or
You can have a
like
you can have a
very you could just find signs that the house is being used like yeah, simply as that. Just find signs that the house is being used. Like sure, it requires information, but like I would say it's better than having one person own a large amount of resources.
I mean, then you're kind of appealing. You're kind of making appealed to consequentialism, where this set of property rights only exists because it's preferable to an alternative, which is ultimately a value judgment rather than a principle.
No. Well, yeah, I guess I'm arguing from a consequentialist point of view. Like, I said before that, like, whatever society wins, like whether it be anarcho-communism or anarcho-capitalism, if it's like the best, if it best serves like society, then that will be the factor.
Yeah. However, I just don't think that, in regards to the purpose that property rights serves, which is being able to resolve disputes over who has what scarce resource, that the maintenance theory of property really has that much utility. Since ultimately,
Yeah.
like, there are a lot of questions as regards to how one knows when one is using the property, and how do you know who has uh, a legitimate claim to exclusive use, especially
Mm-hmm.
since it's something that is both fallible and arbitrary. You mentioned having a full mailbox and having large amounts of and having a car parked in front of it and having a sign.
Uh,
Well,
yeah,
all of
just
those,
like having signs in general, like signs that it's been abandoned, which I'm pretty sure that there are going to be signs that it's abandoned.
I am referring to a physical sign, of course, like a picket sign stuck in front of the lawn, just says like, yeah, this property is still being owned. Well, those could be put in front of abandoned properties prior to the point where they're abandoned. And by abandonment I mean explicit abandonment. The guy makes a formal declaration, is like, yeah, I don't own this property anymore because I don't want to deal with it anymore. So just an active abandonment rather than the guy dies.
Uh, yeah, if he doesn't want to deal with the property anymore, and he like clearly states that, I'm pretty sure like people are either going to find like the number of the original house or the retailer or whatever. Like they're gonna call up that place and say, "Does this guy still own this property anymore?" If they say no, then it's no longer, well. Then that's a sign that they don't own it. If like the house company or something like decide, or not decides, but says that they're not using it, then they're not using it.
Well, that assumes that there's going to be a house company. I only mentioned that specifically in order to give an example of the signs that you gave that the property is still in use, giving false positives.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we're
Well,
back to the original issue. How do you know? You mentioned the house company, but
I'm pretty sure most likely there's gonna be like house companies or retailers selling houses, like they with that, like we see now and like we saw back then, actually like people building houses without the government's permission. I think we're going to see that, like in the anarchist society, house company, because it's very profitable for building houses, you know
mm-hmm.
and most likely there's going to be retailers and house companies. There's my point.
Well, how do the house companies know?
If like maintenance is a problem, then it's in their best interest to serve the customers. And if they have like a, I don't know, information on the guy, it could be very simple information saying if the guy still owns the house or not. Then they could just call up that company and say, well, no, the guy doesn't own the house anymore. In which the house company, I should say, like the electrician or whatever, if they say no,
I think
they're no longer paying bills, or
I think we've already
no.
talked about that. It's hardly unrealistic for people to be paying bills posthumously, especially if they have savings in a bank account that is already being drawn upon
Mhm.
automatically by the utility company.
Well, don't I think most companies actually have like a thing to register if you're dead or not.
Well, I'd hope so. That just
yeah,
makes
like,
sense.
and again, like if there's like a need for it, then I'm sure it's gonna happen because that's where supply and demand falls in.
Hmm.
And if there's an issue with maintenance, I'm pretty sure the markets will provide solutions.
Yeah. Let me think
Uh,
here.
that is assuming that maintenance property is like the core principle of how property ethics
Hmm.
work, which I don't know. Which I saw, like I assume so because it it appeals to me, and I looked at like the data, and I looked at like Northern Ireland. They had like a mutualist type society.
Hmm. And of course, a person doesn't even have to be dead. They can simply have been gone for a long enough time that some group or some individual arbitrarily deemed that the property is no longer in use. Or in
Mm-hmm.
another example that you provided in another voice chat, if the landlord is renting like a house and they haven't been in the house in years, but the person who's been renting it has been paying rent on it for a certain amount of time that they now own it. Trouble is, how long would they have to have been renting it for? And how do you
Uh,
determine that? Who's in charge of it? And how do you verify that?
I in how I think this issue will be solved is basically, again, like if the say if the landlord, it could be like for like a year, if the landlord's not helping you provide for the service and you've noticed that the landlord hasn't been helping you maintain the property, then it's no longer your property if you realize the landlord isn't helping you at all.
Keep in mind, people can have different perceptions of whether or not the landlord is helping. There's no universal, consistent way for people to be able to internalize information. What some person may think, and people may also get false positives, operating under the assumption that the landlord is actually being incredibly helpful when in fact they're literally doing nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
it can work. It's subject to interpretation and it works both ways. Plus, why is that to be year as in 365 days? Why not 364 days or 366?
Well, no, I'm not saying like age in that regard matters, but like I'm saying like if you've noticed that the landlord hasn't been helping you, and sure you can like be tricked into like or kind of like thinking that the landlord is helping you, which you
Well,
haven't realized it yet, so therefore you're
well,
still making the agreement that to pay the landlord for the property.
well, it works backwards. The landlord could also be very, very helpful, but the person who they're renting to is, for some reason, thinking that the landlord does nothing. Probably because the landlord is doing all the work while the renter is away at work themselves.
Uh,
That's one
well,
possibility.
if you can actually point to like if they're helping you or not, then I think you've won the case. If you go decide to go to like a anarchist court or whatever, then and you actually have evidence for like whether or not the landlord or the guy is paying the landlord, then uh, yeah, I think you've won the case if you can point to evidence.
I don't think any anarchist court would hear that case because I don't think any landlord would recognize or valid or would otherwise participate in a court case whose legal system is going to be so heavily stacked against him.
Well, doesn't like the negative like person get to choose the court though?
No, it's going to be something that they both consent to.
Well, sure, you could like consent to, but I'm arguing from a logical standpoint, saying like the victim gets to choose the court case, which most of the time I see that as plausible if like in most and people don't want to like further the aggression toward one another, or the trying to think of the word.
The purpose of the court is to prove that there is a victim at all. If the victim gets to choose what the court is, then you're not only one making sure that the legal system is going to be heavily stacked in the victim's favor, but it's also presupposing that a victim has occurred or victimization has occurred at all. Which, in which case, why are you even going to court?
Uh, you can be going to court if the landlord is kicking you off and they're not really helping you at all. Like if you haven't even noticed that they've been helping you, but they're still demanding money, or they're going to forcefully remove you from their property, their quote unquote.
There are there are mechanisms that are going to be in place in order to prevent that. You don't need a maintenance theory of property in order to solve that. They could be, for example, in violation of their contract. I would assume that any rental agreement would include a contract, in which case, like, the landlord agrees to do da 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 da, and the renter agrees to pay X amount of money. And if he's in
Mm-hmm.
violation of his end of the agreement, why should I pay X amount of money?
Uh, well, I guess if you like made the agreement, but my principles still stand. If uh, you're maintaining the property, then it's your property. Like basically, I guess if you want to make an agreement to where you're paying someone to like, I don't know why you would do this, but like paying someone to for no reason, even though you're the one maintaining the property. And if you don't want the landlord to help you maintain it, then you don't have to pay them anymore, and therefore it's your property.
You can probably negotiate. I'm sure there's all sorts of things you can do, like negotiate lower rent in exchange for higher responsibility with utilities and area
Mm-hmm.
maintenance. I'm
Oh,
sure,
that's what I'm arguing.
yeah, and nothing wrong with that. Depends. It's gonna obviously depend on the party or what party's involved and how much they're willing to pay and not pay. With that said, I think that the principles that you're operating under are rely on too many arbitrary characteristics in order to operate.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that in an anarchist court system that it's going to hold up.
Well, yeah, and in my opinion, the uh, maintenance-based property will inevitably, take place naturally in an anarchist society. People will start developing it naturally.
People will, but since the private courts are not going to be getting as much business because uh, landowners, landlords, people who just generally own property are not going to find it in their interests to voluntarily consent to have their cases adjudicated by those courts. They're going to be outcompeted, I think, by natural law courts,
Mm-hmm.
who are generally going to be a bit more fair, try to figure out what, or have a burden or put a standard of proof in which the active party, the one making the active claim, needs to or provides evidence as to wrong being committed against them.
Uh, yeah. Well, it's been about an hour. Do you want to keep on going, or because I don't really want to upload an hour video to my channel?
We're just under an hour, but we can wrap things up if you want.
Yeah, that sounds fine. We can actually continue this later if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
All right,
yep.
so go ahead and plug your channel.
My channel is The Ethical Pirate. You can subscribe to me in the description below. And Filthy Heretic, you want to plug your channel in?
Yes, my name is Filthy Heretic. I'm with Back Alley Philosophy. Go subscribe us. Go subscribe to us. I recently uploaded a video about the 2008 financial crisis and all of the causes involved. It's an hour and 15 minutes, but trust me, it's worth the whole. It's worth sitting down for the whole thing. It's glorious.
It is. It's a good video.
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. Thanks for stopping by. We'll do this again some other time, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.